I use functional magnetic resonance imaging as a research tool to study the brain. This method works by placing somebody into a very strong magnetic field, many tens of thousands of times the strength of the Earth. That massive magnetic field aligns all the spin and all the protons in the person's body, all the hydrogen nuclei. And that allows us to image their brain and the rest of their body, particularly interested in their brain in this case. All these protons get aligned, and to actually work out where different bits of the brain are, you need to pulse radio frequencies into the brain. So to knock these spinning protons out of alignment with that large homogeneous field. And as these protons come back to their standard state in the field, they release energy, and the scanner picks up those released packets of energy in these radio frequencies. So you're kind of constantly pulsing this brain. It's totally non-invasive, so all this pulsing and magnetic field has no negative impact on the human body, except where you've got metal inside you for any reason. So it's a very safe method that allows us to image the brain, so long as there's no metal. So you don't want to go in there wearing a pacemaker or anything that would actually have metal. And that's because those metal substances, if they're ferromagnetic, will be heated up by the scanner and actually and they will also, of course, start to move inside the magnet, and we don't want that. But when kept safe, it's a completely non-invasive method that allows us to image the human brain by looking at the changes in the molecules inside the nuclei of atoms. So I'll explain how MRI works in very simple terms, but here we're interested in functional magnetic resonance imaging, the F part. In that case, you're after where the oxygen is going in the tissue, particularly in the brain. Where is all the blood carrying that oxygen to the different bits of the brain? Now, if you use your brain, for example, if you're in a dark room and suddenly someone turns on the lights, the amount of activity in the back of your head and your visual cortex is going to ramp up significantly. That's going to draw lots of oxygen into those bits of the brain. And it turns out that the oxygen molecules, when they bind into the blood, change the magnetic properties of it. And by very carefully analysing those changes in the magnetic field in those parts of the body and the brain, we can detect those subtle moment-to-moment, second-by-second changes as to where the oxygen is going. And that's what allows us to decide whether a part of the brain's been active, has been doing something, as opposed to being inactive. So functional magnetic resonance imaging is still one of the most exciting, powerful methods in neuroscience to understand the brain, and in particular the human brain. And the reason it's so exciting is it really allows us to see the entire brain in its entirety, both structurally and functionally, so we can monitor how changes are going on throughout the brain, both in the really deep parts of the brain that are needed to keep you alive, and also those sort of more fun bits of the brain that allow us to do the clever things that make us kind of human. But it can, really tap into emotions, memories, decision-making, all these things that make us us. We can see the building blocks of the anatomy of our thought through this method in particular. It's a great method, it's amazing, but it does come with some limitations. So you're not going to go into this device if you've got any metal in you. So it's going to kill you potentially if you've got some metal somewhere in your head or your brain. So that can be a limitation if you have particular groups. The biggest limitation, I think, with the method is that you can't move it. This is a huge device. You can't take that out around the streets. You can't look at, we don't know anything about how people run. It's a massive part of our daily lives is walking around. We don't know how that operates through this method. And it's always correlational, so we can't test whether a particular brain region is necessary for a task. You can only see, was a particular part of the brain active when you perturb the brain with something like throw a stimulus in there. So those are the sort of main limitations behind MRI, and it can't really tell you what individual neurons are doing either. The resolution of the magnetics, impressive though it is always sort of tens of thousands of neurons. So it's amazing, but you have to work within those limitations. To study a human brain in action, you can use an MRI to study emotional processing, memories, decision-making, language, things like language you couldn't study in animals. But some of the things we've used it for are to examine how people navigate. And this is a very difficult problem with this device because it's not mobile. So to solve that, we've had to take virtual reality worlds and put them inside the scanner and immerse people in the world that is in their imagination and move around. And so doing that, we've been able to uncover how the brain navigates a city, how we can learn new environments, how we can cope with things like when we screwed up and we need to go back to where we came from on a journey. A whole range of different discoveries made through the combination of brain imaging, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and virtual reality. So in a previous study I was working on at the Wellcome Trust Centre for Neuroimaging, we were studying London taxi drivers who are amazing to work with, phenomenal group, and they have a larger hippocampus, as Ellen and Maguire showed many years ago. But they're not like typical students, perfectly healthy that we get in here. So when you're recruiting those, you have to be very careful if they've got any metal in them. Most of the time they're fine, but in one particular case, the guy was adamant he wanted to come and take part, but last minute before coming, I realised he remembered he had a bullet lodged in his back. The chances of having someone with a bullet lodged in their back, who's the one person you desperately need to scan, is not a good odds, but what can you do?